Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Resilient Communities Project 2020-2021 Request for Proposals webinar. My name is Sarah Cheetah, and I am the Resilient Communities Project Coordinator.
And I'm Mike Greco. I'm the Director of the Resilient Communities Project.
So this webinar is one way to learn about the Resilient Communities Project, but we also wanted to start off by letting you know about some other opportunities to connect with us coming up here. So we'll be holding community office hours at various libraries throughout the Twin Cities metro area for the rest of January and at the beginning of February. And Mike and I will be available to meet in person to discuss your ideas for possible projects, offer assistance with your application, or answer other questions that you might have about the Resilient Communities Project. So we encourage you to sign up at the link listed at the bottom of this screen if you're interested in meeting us for office hours and submitting a proposal to RCP by our March 16th deadline. So our agenda for today. During this webinar, we will be covering what RCP is and how we work, identifying and formulating projects, the eligibility and application process, and then we'll also take questions from you as the participants at any time throughout the webinar, and we'll address those questions at the end following our presentation. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see both a chat function as well as a Q&A function. So for this webinar, we'll be using the Q&A function. And you can, again, feel free to type in a question there at any point, and we'll make sure to get to it before our time is up today. So with that, I'll pass it over to Mike, who will discuss the Resilient Communities Project and how we work.
So the Resilient Communities Project is a research and technical assistance program housed at the University of Minnesota's Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, which is better known as CURA. As an all-university research center, CURA connects the resources of departments across the university with organizations and communities throughout Minnesota. RCP's vision is a future in which Minnesota communities are resilient. That is, communities are able to adapt and thrive in response to social, economic, and environmental changes, stresses, and shocks. And our mission is to promote community resilience and student learning through collaborative partnerships between the University of Minnesota and local communities. So our emphasis is on mutually beneficial partnerships where both the students and faculty who are participating and our partner communities gain from the collaboration. So there are two types of partnerships that are available through the Resilient Communities Project. The first type is large-scale partnerships, and these are intended for organizations or agencies that want to make significant progress on a larger slate of projects to advance community resilience. So typically these partnerships include anywhere between 10 and 25 discrete projects. And over the past 7 years, we've engaged in large-scale partnerships with the cities of Minnetonka, North St. Paul, Rosemont, Brooklyn Park, and Ramsey, and with 3 counties in the Twin Cities metro area: Carver County, Ramsey County, and Scott County. Recently, we also began offering small-scale partnerships, which range from 1 to 5 projects. And these partnerships are really well suited for communities that prefer to focus on a smaller number of key projects, or that may not have the staff or the financial resources to sustain a large-scale partnership, or that are interested in learning about how RCP works before considering a large-scale partnerships. So in the last few years, we've had small-scale partnerships with the cities of Dayton, St. Anthony, and Ramsey, with the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, with the League of Minnesota Cities, and with Scott County to continue our partnership from last year with the county. Over the last 7 years, RCP has completed 171 community projects, and those projects have been matched with students in 58 different academic departments at the University of Minnesota, and more than 2,000 students have been involved in those projects. I think one of the main distinguishing features of the Resilient Communities Project, for those of you who may have worked with students or faculty at the university before, is the reach that we have into departments across the university. So this is a list of the 58 departments that we've worked with at some point in the last 7 years. And you can see that it's quite a wide range of academic disciplines. And so I think one of the things that we do well is to match projects with more than just the usual suspect departments. You might be familiar, for instance, with the Humphrey School or with the Carlson School of Management, but there are hundreds and hundreds of departments at the university that might be able to address more specific kinds of issues that your community is grappling with. Next, I want to spend a few minutes just talking about the community benefits from partnering with the Resilient Communities Project. All of these items that I'll talk about are benefits that have been identified by past partners. So these are, this is feedback that we've heard from communities that we've worked with. The first is that it increases organizational capacity. So communities get a high rate of return on investment and very efficient access to students and faculty. It's possible to work with a team of students, multiple teams of students on projects rather than just a single student, but to do that in a way where there isn't a significant demand on your time to directly supervise the students. As we'll explain in a moment, our partnerships involve working with courses at the university, so faculty are involved doing a lot of that supervisory work. If you were to hire an equivalent number of students as interns for the same amount of time, it's likely that it would cost at least 2 to 3 times as much. And of course, you wouldn't have the additional support that RCP provides. And obviously, hiring a consultant to do this kind of work would cost substantially more. RCP also harnesses student creativity and energy. Students can provide creative concept ideas, design plans, policy recommendations, all of which can spark new ways of thinking, help to energize staff, and get projects that are stuck moving again. RCP also expands the conversation by engaging stakeholders in low-stakes, non-threatening ways. So many communities tell us that working through RCP has helped to initiate or deepen relationships with external stakeholders, as well as internal staff in other departments. Working with RCP can also raise awareness about issues, explaining why an issue is important or timely, or why it will soon emerge as a significant challenge in your community. RCP also provides increased credibility with decision makers. A recommendation coming from the university is often seen as more objective and more credible than a similar recommendation from a staff person who might have a vested interest in a particular policy or approach. RCP offers a convenient way to test the waters for riskier solutions as well. Students can help to provide political cover to think outside the box because they can propose something that may be impractical, but is still important to consider or talk about. And it's much easier to have students present that idea than it is to have staff present that idea. And finally, RCP, by giving you access to the breadth of disciplines and departments at the university, helps to offer multidisciplinary perspectives on issues. So through RCP, you can get access to any department at the University of Minnesota that has courses that are relevant to address your projects. And many of the projects end up getting matched with multiple courses across multiple disciplines. So I'll hand things back to Sarah. She's going to talk a little bit about how RCP works.
So throughout the entire process, RCP is with you every step of the way to assist with project management and troubleshooting as needed. So first off, partners identify 1 to 25 project ideas and project leads. And the projects are identified by you as the community, not the University of Minnesota. You will also identify a project lead who is a staff member in your agency who will be the primary point of contact for students and faculty throughout the entire partnership. And project leads should expect to spend about 2 to 4 hours per week on the project each semester that the project is active. Next, project ideas are refined with RCP staff and matched with 1 or more U of M courses. So we work together to clearly identify the problem or the issue, your needs, what you hope to have students do, and then which academic disciplines might be a good fit for your project. Course matches are usually graduate or professional level courses or individual students or teams, and it's typical to match with multiple courses. Next, the projects are collaboratively scoped, generally with a faculty member in advance of the course starting, and then refined and finalized once students are assigned to your project. Then students complete their class projects for academic credit, and everyone has a vested interest in producing a good outcome here. Project leads want the project to yield useful findings and recommendations for their community. Students are getting course credit and of course want to receive a good grade, and faculty want the project to be a good experience for their students. And lastly, students deliver final presentations and work products. Usually a final presentation is part of a class, but sometimes it can be a community presentation that project leads request. And then the work products are typically a report, but can vary widely depending on your project need and goals. So in the past, we've had students produce maps, collect data, create posters, policy memos, presentations, short films, and more. And all of these work products are negotiated upfront, so you know exactly what you are getting at the end of the term. So again, we're with you every step of this process, and we use a program called Basecamp to help streamline communication and manage the project. And we're there to help refine the scope, ensure frequent and timely communication, to mediate and advocate for all of the collaborators that are part of the project, to make sure that timelines are being met, to help schedule site visits and check-in meetings, to answer questions. And then we also use social and traditional media to raise the visibility and profile of all of the collaborators on the project. So if you've worked with faculty and students before, this piece is the piece that's often missing and is really a value add of partnering with RCP. So next I'll turn it over to Mike, who will talk about some of our projects from previous partnerships.
I'm going to talk about two projects, and I think these will illustrate how the matching process happens and how classes from multiple disciplines can help build upon one another to ultimately answer the question that these examples were intended to address. So the first example is from the city of North St. Paul. North St. Paul had recently passed a Living Streets plan, and for those who are not familiar with Living Streets, it combines the concept of complete streets, so providing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure as well as infrastructure for automobiles, and also includes the concept of green infrastructure, so using things like rain gardens and bioswales and boulevard trees to help with stormwater management. North St. Paul passed the Living Streets plan with very little public opposition and in fact quite a bit of public support from some sectors. And when it went to implement the plan, got pushback from the neighborhood where they first tried to implement these ideals. So the goal of the project was to address public opposition to implementing the plan and help the city figure out how to better engage the public in advance of these projects so that there would be community buy-in. First, this project was matched with a course in public health. A team of students was asked to document some of the environmental and health benefits of living streets, since these are some of the less controversial and more compelling reasons to support a living streets approach. So this information was provided in a way that could then be shared with the public. And at that point, we also engaged the local watershed district, which was interested in seeing this project move forward. And they helped as a stakeholder to help the students figure out what kind of information would be most useful for the city to use in advocating for this approach to the public. Next, this project was matched with a team of students in architecture. And these students designed some interactive tools to communicate the value of green infrastructure. They created prototypes for a rain garden in a box, which was intended to show some of the aesthetic and environmental benefits of rain gardens, and also a living streets lab, which could be used to demonstrate the various components of living streets. Both tools were intended to be used in community meetings and in workshops to demystify the concept of living streets and help to address some of the concerns of the public. Finally, the project was matched with an urban planning capstone team where students designed a prototype public engagement process for street reconstruction projects. As part of this effort, they created a visual preference survey showing some local streets in North St. Paul before and after implementation of a living streets approach. And they designed this tool to be conducted on an iPads and piloted it with residents in several neighborhoods. So at the end of this project, North St. Paul had very usable resources that they could then adapt for their own purposes in outreach to the public, in neighborhood workshops, around each of the future street reconstruction projects that attempted to implement living streets. The next example is from the city of Rosemont. Rosemont is an exurban community on the edge of the Twin Cities metro area, and they were interested in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in their community. This project was matched with, ultimately with 5 different courses over one academic term, or one academic year, I should say. The first was a sustainability studies course and also a public policy course in which teams of students in each of those courses documented some baseline data for greenhouse gas emissions, looking at multiple sectors in the city, including vehicle use, home energy consumption, and food choices. Next, we engaged an adult education course. And in this class, a team of students created public education and outreach curriculum and materials that the city could use to reach out to Rosemont residents with some practical steps that they could take in their daily lives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help mitigate climate change. Finally, this project was matched with a team of students in urban planning and with 2 students in the law school. And these students identified best practices and policy actions in other suburban communities that were used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So these are policies that Rosemont could consider adapting and adopting in its own community to help achieve that goal. And now Sarah's going to talk about a couple examples from last year's partnership with Scott County.
Okay, so the first example is with the Scott County CDA, and the project lead was the assistant housing director. And the issue that they were facing is a lack of affordable housing in the county, which is similar to many other communities across the state and across the country. And what the CDA wanted to do was to try to expand the number of landlords that were accepting housing choice vouchers in the county to be able to offer more affordable housing opportunities for people. So first of all, we matched the project with a program evaluation course where students created a survey instrument, and then they surveyed existing landlords who were accepting vouchers and landlords who were not accepting vouchers to try to get to some reasons for why they were or were not accepting those vouchers. And the survey findings underscored what the CDA staff had suspected, that unfortunately there were some negative perceptions of who was using housing choice vouchers in the county. And so because of this, we worked to match with a documentary film studies course. And these students created short film clips to tell the story of several voucher holders in the county and their contributions to the local community, and to attempt to dispel some of those myths. The next example here is from the Scott County Transportation Department, and the project lead for this project was one of the transportation engineers. And the question here was, how can the county plan for the coming of connected and autonomous vehicles? And so this is an example of a project where we matched with just one course. However, the scope of that course was quite large, and we had several student teams working on the project. And through the large scope of the class, those students were able to answer all of the initial questions and project needs for the county. And so we had a team of urban planning students in a land use planning course take a look at 4 different sites throughout the county and how each of those distinct sites could plan for connected and autonomous vehicles. So one group of students was looking at pedestrian safety. Another group of students was looking at a master planned urban village. Another group of students was looking at a park and ride facility. And the last group was looking at how freight would adapt to connected and autonomous vehicles. So now that we've given you some examples, I'll turn it back over to Mike, who will talk about identifying and formulating projects of your own.
Identifying suitable projects for a partnership can be challenging. And so we wanted to spend a few minutes talking about how to approach that task. To begin, I think it's important to understand that resilience is a very broad term that can encompass a wide range of issue areas. We've collaborated with communities on projects related to everything from housing, renewable energy and land use, to city county administration, public safety, and education. I think the takeaway here is don't limit your thinking to one department or one division in your organization. Projects that can foster sustainability, livability, and resilience can literally be found throughout your organization and your community. So we encourage you to think broadly as you consider what projects might be suitable. It's also helpful to think about what makes for a good project. And based on our experience and feedback from our past partners, we've identified a couple characteristics that we think are important in making a good project. First, the issue is an organizational or community priority. That is typically demonstrated by being part of a strategic plan or a comprehensive plan or some other guiding document for your community or your organization. This helps to ensure that work on the project will be prioritized by the project lead, the staff person who's leading the effort with the students, and that the work at the end of the partnership will actually be put to use. Another important characteristic is that the issue is ripe for consideration, or that it's timely. So it's good if there's some urgency in addressing the issue at this particular moment in time, rather than an issue that might be nice to consider but isn't all that urgent. Third, it's part of the current staff work plan. Ideally, projects that are nominated for the partnership are not extra work for the staff who are involved that they have to do on top of their regular duties. Ideally, it's helping them work on a project that's already part of their daily work, and this is simply adding additional capacity or providing assistance that they can't get elsewhere. In addition, it's important that the staff lead participate in drafting the project idea. This is feedback that we've heard from many communities and many project leads over the years, that if they were involved in drafting the project, it's much more likely that they'd stay engaged with students, that they would treat the work seriously, that they would use the work after the partnership concludes, as opposed to situations where maybe a senior staff member thinks the project is important, writes up the project description, and then hands it off to another staff member to actually work with the students. That being said, it is important to have buy-in from senior staff and elected officials, both for the time that the staff person who's leading the project will be committing to the partnership, but also for the project itself, that they see it as important and significant work. It's helpful as well to have stakeholders identified and engaged and ready to participate in the project. We find that the most successful projects are those that engage relevant internal and external stakeholders in some way, whether that's participating in a survey related to the project or actually being involved in working with the students on whatever research or technical assistance they're providing. It's helpful if the scope of the project is clear and focused, although that is something that, as Sarah mentioned, we can help you work on as you're putting a proposal together or even after you've been accepted into the partnership. Typically, projects that are too broad or too vague, not surprisingly, often don't produce useful outcomes. So the clearer you are about what it is you're hoping to accomplish by doing the project, the more likely it is that you'll get something usable and useful on the other end. Finally, it's helpful to have a clear understanding of how the information will actually be used. That's another key factor we found in determining whether or not a project moves to implementation or to the next stage after the partnership is concluded. If there isn't a clear understanding of how the information will be used, it's much more likely that the student work will become one of those reports that gathers dust on the shelf. Now, Sarah is going to share some ideas for selecting projects for an RCP partnership.
Okay, so I'm going to take us out to the RCP website where we've built a tool to help with selecting projects. So I'm going to follow the link here at the bottom of the slide. If you want to copy and paste that into your browser and follow along, it's z.umn.edu/project-selection. And you can also get to that from our homepage if you're on rcp.umn.edu. Up at the top, you'll see an Apply to RCP button, and it's a drop down there. So if you want to go ahead and follow that link, and I will pull it up here. Okay, here we go. So this really mirrors a lot of what Mike was just mentioning, how to select projects, select project ideas from across your agency's departments and divisions. Here we give a few different examples of departments that we've worked with in the past, although certainly this is not all encompassing. Next, consider the full range of your project needs. And so your project, you're able to partner with us at any stage for this project. It can be analysis, planning, design to implementation, evaluation, case studies and best practices, conceptual design, GIS mapping, cost benefit analysis, asset mapping. These are just some of the project needs that we've addressed in the past with different courses here at the University of Minnesota. Next here, consider areas where the University of Minnesota has particular specialized knowledge and capacity. So again, here are those departments that we've worked with in the past, but keep in mind too that we're always creating new partnerships and new relationships. And so certainly if your project has a need that's outside of the scope of these departments listed here, the university is a very large place, and we love to make those new connections with new departments and faculty across the university. Next, it can be helpful to look to past RCP partnerships for inspiration. So here with this dropdown, we've categorized a lot of our recent projects so you can see what we've worked on in the housing realm, in the transportation realm, environmental stewardship, staffing and operations, and so forth. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom here, you can link directly to our partnership pages for our past partners, and you can see each one of the projects that these communities included in the partnership, and you can link out to the final work product or the final deliverable for the project. All of the work that's done as part of the RCP partnership is housed on the university's Digital Conservancy, which is essentially an open source library where you're able to access research and reports. And then lastly, convene a group of community stakeholders and partners to solicit ideas. And we provide a couple examples here from past partnerships and how they worked throughout their agency to solicit projects to be included in an RCP partnership. So now I'm going to go back here to the presentation, and we'll start talking about eligibility and the application process.
So we'll start with who is eligible to participate in the Resilient Communities Project program. And I should mention that much of the information I'm going to cover in the next few minutes is discussed in detail in the actual request for proposals for large-scale partnerships and small-scale partnerships. You can find those on our website, and I'll be giving a direct link web address in just a moment. But note that the deadline for proposals for either of those partnerships is March 16th, 2020. So it's coming up in a couple months. So to be eligible for the program, your organization or agency needs to be located within the state of Minnesota. We do not work outside of the state. Your organization needs to have sufficient staff capacity to support whatever level of participation you decide to propose. So for a small scale partnership, that's identifying a single staff person who can be the lead contact throughout the partnership for each individual project. You could have multiple project leads for multiple projects. We recommend that no project lead work with more than 2 projects at one time, just because of the time commitment that's involved in working with students. For a large-scale partnership, we also ask that you identify, in addition to the project leads, one individual in your organization who can help coordinate all of the efforts of your staff as part of the partnership. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Finally, your organization or agency needs to be one of the following to be eligible: a municipality, so a city or a township, a county government, a tribal government, a special district like a watershed, transit district, school district, or conservation district, a regional government agency, for example, the Metropolitan Council, or a regional partnership, which could include any or all of the above applying jointly. And I will mention that Carver County, although our partnership was directly with the county, is a good example of a regional partnership. Carver County engaged 3 cities within the county, their school district, their historical society, their community development agency, and their transit district to all contribute a couple of projects to the partnership. So a very good example of how regional partnership might work. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the application timeline. Our request for proposals was issued back in the summer of 2019 and is open, as I said, through March 16th. So for the remainder of this month and next month, RCP staff are available for informational presentations or to discuss project ideas. Sarah mentioned at the top of the webinar, the office hours that we'll be holding later this month and early in February. We'll also identify a couple other options for working with us. But again, we are here to help with your proposal at any stage, from brainstorming ideas or even talking about what a partnership might look like or what size partnership is suitable, all the way to helping you finalize a proposal for submission by our March 16th deadline. Proposals are due by 11:59 p.m. Central Time on March 16th, and those can be submitted online or through a single PDF document that is emailed to the Resilient Communities Project. Our email address is rcp@umn.edu. And again, all of the detailed information about preparing and submitting a proposal is available in the request for proposals that you can find on our website. Finally, by the end of March 2020, we expect to be able to notify communities that are selected for partnerships for the upcoming year. And likely we will be selecting multiple communities and both a range of small scale and large scale partnerships based on the proposals that we receive. So now I'm going to take just a few minutes to briefly talk about what the components are of a small scale partnership application and a large scale partnership application. At the very bottom of this slide, you see the URL that I've been referring to that has the detailed request for proposals, z.umn.edu/apply-RCP. So you can download those requests for proposals, and it should provide all the information you need to apply to the program. But very quickly, small scale partnerships have 4 basic requirements. Providing partner information. So this is information about your organization or your community, including things like annual budget, total number of staff, current population, etc. Second, the proposed projects that you would like to be part of the partnership. And again, for small scale partnerships, this is between 1 and 5 project ideas. And here we're looking for a bit of detail about the project. So things like a description of the project, just a simple paragraph or 2, 3 to 5 specific questions or issues or ideas that you would like students to consider, any existing plans, reports, or data that are available related to this project, and then some potential community partners or stakeholders who might be involved in the project as well. Third, we ask for a demonstration of support for your application from your organization or agency. So typically this includes something like a letter of support from a city or county manager or administrator. It could be a resolution passed by your city council or your county board. It could also be letters of support from partner agencies or funding entities who will be participating in the partnership. And finally, we look for a simple acknowledgement of a local financial contribution. So I'll talk about that in a moment. We don't require payment up front for the partnership. We do require payment during the partnership, but it's typically spread out over 2 fiscal years. So that helps in planning for a partnership that you might not have anticipated when your budget planning was happening for the current fiscal year. And the bottom line is we'd be happy to work with you to make this work financially if you're not able to make the upfront payment at the beginning of the partnership. Large-scale partnerships require some additional information. The 4 different components here, in addition to the 4 that I've already discussed, are highlighted in red. So we do ask for a resiliency statement, a statement of what community resilience means in your community, how you interpret that, that concept. We ask for a demonstration of administrative capacity. So as I mentioned, because the number of projects is much more significant, we ask for a coordinator to coordinate all of your participation of your community or organization or agency. Typically that person can expect to spend anywhere between 10 and 15 hours per week for the duration of the partnership. So it's a fairly significant commitment, and it's important for us that we know that that commitment is there and is understood, and that you have a staff person in mind who can provide that. And then in addition, we're looking for one project lead for each project. And we typically tell project leads they should expect that they'll spend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours per week with their project anytime their project is active during a given academic semester. So again, demonstrating that that commitment is there, that the staff are available, and that there is support within the organization for staff using their time in that way. Public involvement is also an additional item that we expect for the full-scale proposals. And here we're looking for evidence that your organization or agency will meaningfully engage residents or other stakeholders in the effort, in the partnership in some way. So that can be demonstrated in a number of ways. For instance, having a citizen advisory committee involved in some way in a project. Some communities have actually reached out to residents to get ideas for projects from residents. So that's another way that it can be done. And often it's simply a matter of explaining how the work that students produced will be shared with the public during and after the partnership. Finally, we asked for some indication of what next steps your organization or agency plans to take with respect to the partnership. So describing what your strategy is for taking the work that's produced on these individual projects and using it in some way to move those projects forward and to move the overall effort of your community to become more resilient. How will you do that? Next, I'd like to just very quickly talk about the selection criteria that we use as we're evaluating proposals. So as you prepare a proposal, it's really helpful to keep these in mind to make sure that the way you're framing your projects and your overall proposal help us use these criteria to evaluate that proposal. So your proposal should demonstrate top-level support and administrative capacity, and I've explained previously how you might demonstrate that. It should have a clear resiliency focus. So again, that resiliency statement, or even within the individual project descriptions, indicating how that project will impact community resilience would be a good strategy for demonstrating that. Project relevance and impact. So demonstrating that these projects, again, are significant, are part of your community's strategic plan or comprehensive plan or some other guiding document. And also demonstrating that these are timely projects in some way. Community engagement, so how you will engage the public, residents, other stakeholders, other partners. The likelihood of a match with university courses. Obviously, this is something that might be a little more difficult for you to determine, but that again is why we encourage you, if you're planning on submitting a proposal, to contact us, to reach out to us, to talk a little bit about your project ideas. We can often help you frame the project in a way that demonstrates why it would be a good student project and why the research and technical assistance that students can provide would be useful. And finally, external partnerships. So we do strongly encourage applicants to collaborate with other local entities. That could be a neighboring city, a county, a watershed district, a transportation district, other higher education institutions, to help formulate projects and potentially share costs of the partnership as well. So I mentioned earlier that there is a financial contribution expected as part of the proposal. RCP does receive some funding and in-kind support from CURA, the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, where we are housed. But we also depend to a significant extent on a local financial contribution from our partners to operate the program. So for a small scale partnership, so again, that's 1 to 5 projects, the financial contribution that we ask of partner communities is $5,000 per project. For large-scale partnerships, so that's anywhere between 10 and 25 projects, we ask for a contribution of $50,000 as a base fee and then $4,000 per individual project. I should mention that these funds can come from many sources. They don't just have to come from your organization's budget. And so again, as you think about external partners that you might bring into a partnership or stakeholders that have some vested interest in seeing this project go forward, they might be good sources of small amounts of funding that collectively can help offset much of the cost of the partnership. So that can be things like a city or county government, redevelopment agencies, housing authorities, park districts, state agencies, local businesses or chambers of commerce, philanthropic organizations. So we strongly encourage you to think about other partners you can bring into the proposal and into the partnership in order to help offset some of the cost of participating in RCP. Finally, we want to emphasize again that we are here to help. In addition to the detailed application instructions in the request for proposals, we are going to post a video of this webinar on our website, hopefully by the end of the week. We'll also include the PowerPoint slides as well. So if someone in your organization was not able to attend the webinar, they would be able to view it after the fact. Again, those community office hours that we mentioned at the top of the webinar over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks will be in locations throughout the Twin Cities metro area, holding office hours at libraries. And the link that's listed there, z.umn.edu/office-hours, is a place where you can sign up to ensure that your time slot won't be taken by someone else. So if we're going to be in your neighborhood, or if there's another date that works better for you, we'd strongly encourage, again, if you're thinking about applying to RCP, to come meet with us to talk about potential projects and your overall proposal. Once again, we're happy to do community visits. So if you would like us to come present in person to your staff or to a group of stakeholders, we're happy to come out and talk about the program. This is really a good way to introduce the program and get buy-in from staff and elected officials who may not have heard of RCP before, or who will ultimately need to approve an expenditure of funds and a commitment of staff time to participate. If you'd like to arrange a community visit, simply email us at rcp@umn.edu, and we'd be happy to set that up at a time that works for you. And finally, we are happy to host a proposal development workshop in your community. So this is a good choice if your organization or agency is expecting to apply to RCP and you'd like assistance either just getting started, putting the proposal together, or finalizing and putting the finishing touches on a proposal before submitting it to RCP. So again, if you simply email us, we'd be happy to set up a time to come out and do a development workshop in your community. So at this point, we're going to open things up to questions. I think we have a few that have been submitted, but if you have other questions and would like to submit them now, we'll try to go through them more or less in order. So we have a question from someone asking if there are any plans to reach out to the School of Nursing. And as Sarah mentioned, the list of departments that we've worked with at the university is not exhaustive. Those are the departments we've worked with thus far. But anytime we get a new project that we haven't worked with before, one of the first things we do is think very broadly about what departments and what colleges and schools at the university might be relevant. So certainly if the School of Nursing was relevant to a particular project, we would reach out to them and try to find appropriate faculty and appropriate courses that would match with the project. We have another question here, someone asking if we don't think we'll be ready by March 16th, when is the next application opportunity for small projects? That is a great question. We're still kind of working out the details of that, but at the moment we have a rolling deadline for small scale partnerships. March 16th is highlighted as the next deadline simply because we need a few months to get projects organized in order for students to begin working on them in fall semester of 2020. So sometime in late March, we'll be issuing our next request for proposals. And I think at this point, we're thinking we'd probably have 3 deadlines every year for small scale partnerships. One for projects to begin fall semester, one for projects to begin spring semester, which is January to May, and then one for projects that might take place over the summer. So I would guess probably sometime midsummer would be the next deadline for small scale partnerships.
Mm-hmm. And I would just emphasize too that we try to be as flexible as we can. And so if you have any sort of unique needs or unique questions about the partnership, we encourage you to contact us directly, and hopefully we can work together to try and find a way to make it work. Other questions?
Don't be shy. We'll give folks a few minutes to submit another question here before signing off, but I did want to mention that we will be emailing a link to a short evaluation to all of the participants sometime later this week. We'd really appreciate your feedback, both on the presentation, what kind of information we didn't provide that would be useful, as well as how valuable this information is or was. And again, encourage you to not hesitate at all to reach out to us if you have questions, would like to meet with us, or if there's anything else we can answer related to the program. So it looks like another question just came in. Is there a limit to how many projects can be running at the same time with RCP? For example, what is your capacity to accept applications? That's a good question. You know, we anticipate, as I mentioned, at some point, we'll have a mix of small scale and large scale proposals this year, and we'll likely have multiple partners. I think we both agree that as the 2 staff people who run this program, there is a limit to how many projects we can take on, but I'd say part of the cost of the large scale partnership, the reason we have that $50,000 base fee is that we often have to hire some additional staff in the form of graduate students to help with our program. So, you know, generally speaking, we have quite a bit of bandwidth to take on new projects. I think probably the more important question is, as you're thinking about a proposal, what's your capacity to do these projects? And so I think we've had a couple examples where communities probably did a few more projects than they were really able to handle, or expected 1 or 2 staff people to do more projects than they really had time to commit to. So I'd encourage you as applicants as well to think about how much time you have to commit to the project. There is for sure a commitment of time. There's no question about that. I think in the long run, most people would agree that it probably saves time for their individual projects, but during the course of the partnership, there is definitely a time commitment involved. All right, well, it looks like we don't have any more questions at this time. So thanks again to everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing your proposals by March 16th.
Thank you.